Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Confessions, where we talk about all things artist alley, manufacturing products as an artist, and small business advice. I'm your host, Macy, and I'm the artist and designer behind Mualcaina, a small business focused on kawaii designs. Outsourcing and manufacturing your own products can be really daunting when you're new to Artist Alley. A few years ago, many artists may have been DIYing their own keychains and merch, but now it's pretty common to see manufactured merch in Artist Alley. Considering how competitive it is to get into cons nowadays, it's really important that you balance having presentable products while also not breaking the bank. I'm excited to welcome our guest who has been vending in Artist Alley full time, a fellow SoCal artist, and also a fellow vlogger. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Ivy, better known as Drawn by Ivy.
Hello,
Hello!
hello. Thank you for having me,
Thank you
Macy.
for joining. It's been a long time coming. So I'd love to start out if you can talk about yourself and how you started Drawn by Ivy.
Hello, I am Ivy, better known as Drawn by Ivy. Online, I am a Vietnamese American digital artist and small business owner. Drawn by Ivy started during June of 2020, during the COVID pandemic, where I suddenly had so much extra time on my hand, and starting a like sticker shop or an art business was something I always wanted to do. And so I went ahead and did it. I did have a like plant Instagram around that time. So I actually started this journey drawing plant stickers and selling it to my following there. And it eventually kind of transitioned into fan art and honestly kind of blew out of proportion in a good way. And this is where we're at now, doing this full time, selling online and in person at conventions.
Amazing. I feel like, at least like within our trio too, and even within Artist Alley, a lot of people started 2020. So as of now, you're doing everything yourself, like packing orders, social media.
Yeah, it's a one woman show out here. So I am the artist, but also social media manager, accountant, the order fulfillment center for all your online orders. So everything by myself.
Nice, nice. So what did you do before you started Drawn by Ivy? Since you said this is your current full time now, right?
Yeah, I was just out of university and working in behavioral therapy with neurodivergent children.
What made you realize you wanted to do this full time?
I think I was toying with the idea of doing this full time for like after a year of doing the business, but I don't think it really solidified my choice until after ALA of 2023. So last year, I wasn't sure if I could sustain myself with just running the online shop, but I think after giving vending in person a chance and seeing the potential in doing these conventions, it really gave me the push that I needed to take the leap of faith and start doing this full time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of artists, especially once they start vending at conventions, they realize that this can definitely be a viable full-time opportunity. Because I know for me, it wasn't until I started doing in-person events was when I realized, like, oh, I can sustain my lifestyle with cons. Because sometimes online isn't enough, at least for me. So, how was the transition like for you going from a typical secure, like 9 to 5 job to doing art full time?
Well, I think the first thing that I struggled with a lot was that there was suddenly just so much more free time, and I didn't really know how to delegate it because technically at work you have someone that tells you what to do, when to do it, what your schedule looks like, when your deadlines are. But when you are running a small business as your full time job, you're your own boss. So then I think I really took some time to fall into the role of being my own boss and being able to set a schedule for myself and really get into the groove of like working from home.
You have a mix of fan art and OCs, and I know you're also starting to go into creating more original characters. How do you balance designing merch that you like yourself versus what's popular or trending at the time?
Well, I've always made it a rule for myself to not draw things from shows that I haven't watched already. So any of the fan art that I draw has been from either animes or movies that I've consumed myself personally. And I think that kind of forces me to not have to fall into these trends of, oh, what's popular and trending right now, and feeling the need to have to draw for that show because it's doing so well in the fan art world. just like truly drawing what brings you joy. And for me, that's from the shows that I watch and enjoy. I think it kind of prevents you from feeling that pressure to draw what's popular. And as for like moving into original characters or just original art in general, once again, it comes down to drawing what you love, because I think that's what most of us find the most joyous about art, right? Drawing things that you love and feel connected to. So for me, it's just been like plants, my cats, silly little characters with silly, relatable quotes, because I feel like it's super relatable for me and probably for a lot of other people's as well. So baseline is draw what you love and connect with.
I remember before there were some people who would suggest certain anime for me to draw in terms of fan art. Like I remember last year, a lot of people really wanted Bleach pins, so to say. But I have watched a few episodes. I think I just couldn't really get into it personally. And as much as even like with my like I drew Sailor Moon characters, but I haven't put them into production or anything. But I've only watched
Mm-hmm.
like a few episodes of Sailor Moon, and I feel a little uncomfortable going through with specific anime to make into fan art if I haven't consumed that media, just because I feel like it's easier to connect with other people when you've actually watched it. Like sometimes I love talking about One Piece with some of the customers who come by my booth, and I think they also appreciate it more when you've also watched it. Like I don't know if they're just being a little condescending and like quizzing me. If they're like, "Oh, like there's sometimes I don't know if it's because I'm a girl or maybe they're just being I don't know kind whatever." But I remember one time someone wanted to buy like the Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy pins, and they were like, "Oh, I want the Monster Trio pins," and I'm like, "Obviously, if you haven't watched One Piece, you wouldn't know who the Monster Trio are." And I'm like, "Okay," and then I mean I had to double check like, "Oh, you want these three?" And they're like, "Yeah." So I was like, "Okay." I don't know if that's just like my little thing. I don't know if it's because I'm a girl, but
No, I definitely have had those experiences as well. Once again, not sure if it's a because I'm a girl or just maybe sometimes people are used to referring to specific characters using other like nicknames or code names that they've had. But I think also just like when you draw the characters that you know and love, it kind of brings their personality and the essence of their character into your drawing, because like even for example with poses and expressions, and if I haven't watched the anime and I have no idea what personality that character has, I don't think I'd be able to like properly put them in a pose with a facial expression that really represents them. You know, like can you imagine like a Zoro pin with him like
I know.
kind of thing like that? Like that's not him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just knowing the show that you're drawing fan art for and actually enjoying and loving the characters like can bring a lot into the art that you're drawing of them.
I can definitely see that. And it's really nice because even with the topic of connecting with the customer or like the people who love your art and having it's nice knowing that content because then you can also introduce like inside jokes in your art. Like, oh, only people who have watched this anime or have read the manga would understand this. But even with naming my listings, because obviously you can't use official names, like for Naname it would be Overtime, or with Sukuna I would
Mm-hmm.
put Thirst Trap, or I don't remember what I did
Thirst
for
trap.
Toji. I think it was something about like I don't know,
Worm. Would
something
you love
about
me if I was a
daddy.
worm?
Oh, that would be great, actually. But I feel like there's a lot of room to have fun with fan art, even though I'm going in the direction of wanting to pursue more original characters. I love One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen a little too much to completely break away from fan art personally. So, on the subject of manufacturing, I think from what I remember, you used to make your own stickers and prints, but now you've turned to outsourcing like that production.
Yeah,
Oh,
I started off making all my stickers and prints in the house, so printing and cutting everything myself. And I think when I first started off, that was a very viable and good option because costs are low and you can control how much of each design that you have, so you don't end up with excess overstock. But I think it got to a point where um, I'm trying to keep stock for my online shop, but every convention I was printing and cutting hundreds upon hundreds of stickers and prints, and it just felt like all the time that I had when I wasn't vending or packing orders, I was spending it on making these stickers and prints, and I think it just became too unmanageable. So I switched into outsourcing, which honestly was a very good decision. I think despite the cost per unit of each item being higher through outsourcing, the time that you gain from outsourcing is valuable because now I can dedicate that time to drawing, making new designs, or even social media content creation. So time is money, right? So I think once you get to a certain point in your small business career, consider switching to outsourcing because it was a game changer for me.
I definitely feel that. In the beginning, I did outsource my stickers just because I don't know, I think just from past because this isn't necessarily like the first small business that I started, and I know even from before I didn't like the production aspect of it. I think if I was very heavily involved in manufacturing something, I'm going to get bored, not bored, but I'm going to get tired of it really quickly and burnt out. So I think that's why I initially like from the get-go went with manufacturing things or outsourcing production. For those who are just starting, like, would you recommend doing things yourself in the beginning before moving to outsourcing?
I think if you are starting from like ground zero with like absolutely no online following and you're starting your business up from basically nothing, I think making your own things at home is a good option to start with because once again, you can quality control, you can spend less on making the products and make sure that you're only making the amount that you need and not spend extra money for amounts of products that you don't need. So I definitely think it's a very good option, but there's always downsides to it. Like during production, you can mess up a lot. Sticker cutting machines are very finicky, so that's a lot of resources gone to waste. But I think ultimately it is a good thing to start with production yourself first and move on to outsourcing. Also, because outsourcing can cost a lot of money upfront, and not everyone has those types of funds available for them to drop like hundreds of dollars on just a few sticker designs.
Yeah, at least for me, I only started with stickers initially. I think it was like stickers and car magnets because those were the most affordable options. And I think it took me maybe like half a year to almost a year before I even went into enamel pins, but that's because I had a Kickstarter and then later on Ita bags. And I feel like if I hadn't started off with stickers and magnets and like the cheaper types of products, I don't think I would have been able to scale to that. I don't know how people like jump from to enamel pins. Like that's pretty expensive.
I definitely agree. It's always, I think, a smart idea to start off with the lower ticket items because it's less of an investment when you're not sure if this is going to work out or something you want to keep pursuing. And through those small investments of selling stickers, prints, card magnets, as you did, that's where you build the funds that you need to reinvest into larger products. I think it took me a while until I even did enamel pins. I think like a year, year and a half, maybe almost 2 years into running my business where I finally took the jump to making pins and larger items like tote bags and bucket hats.
Yeah, definitely requires a lot of growth. And I think especially if it's their first business or even just venturing into running their business, it's better to just slowly move into the products that they want and like the bigger ticket items rather than just jumping all in. So on the topic of manufacturing, what's the typical process when working with manufacturers? We could, I know you have like a lot of different types of products, but we can start with
Mm-hmm.
maybe like your tote bags as an example. And it could be from like
Okay,
when you start researching to when you receive your product.
so when I first started off trying to find manufacturers for the tote bag, it's basically going online onto Alibaba and scrolling through the list of manufacturers that they have available. And there's really no easy way to do this, right? It's reaching out, contacting them, telling them what your idea for a design is, and asking them for a quote. And I did this with several manufacturers because I think it's a good idea to be able to get a sample from several manufacturers to have something to test and compare your samples with. Because let's say you go with your first manufacturer and you get the bag and you're like, oh, this is pretty good quality, and you stick to that bag. If you had gone with the second manufacturer and gotten their bag and it happened to be better quality, you wouldn't have known that you could have gotten better quality from somewhere else if you hadn't also gone with the second person for a sample. So it was a lot of receiving samples from different manufacturers to see whose quality I liked the best. And the process was time consuming and a lot of money because samples are not cheap and these samples take a long time to make. So when you're moving into manufacturing and outsourcing these larger items such as tote bags, it can be a very hefty investment at first, and which is why you need to build up the funds to be able to do so. But once I found a manufacturer that I like, it's a matter of keeping a close working relationship with them. And they're basically the one that I use now for all of my tote bags because I'm really happy with the quality that I receive from them.
That's great. I feel like, especially that relationship with your manufacturer rep is very important because I've noticed that even if different artists have the same rep, I wouldn't say the quality is different, but depending on how, not like how you treat your rep, but how you converse with them can definitely like
Mhm.
change how like the product experience can be. So yeah, I feel like that's very important to also consider with manufacturing in general.
Yeah, I think it's really important to like maintain close working relationships with them, especially because as you start working with them, they have like a sense of trust in you and doing business with you. So sometimes when I need like a rush order for a convention that's like a month out or so and I need something done like ASAP, by having these close relationships with these manufacturers, you can literally come to them and be like, "Hey, can you please like prioritize my order and my production?" So I'm really hoping to get them by a certain time. And most of the time, because you have a nice working relationship with them, they will prioritize your goods. And most of these times, I get my rush order in time because I am close with my manufacturer. I'll like even send them messages on Chinese New Year and be like, "Hey, Happy New Year's," or any holiday there is, send a message to your rep because it's like little things like this that help form a connection between you two and just kind of makes you their preferred or favorite customer, and it gives you good treatment when you like have a favor to ask of them.
100%. I every Lunar New Year I always greet them, and even with because sometimes I'm like, do they celebrate Christmas? But I just send them like happy holidays, like general holidays.
Yeah.
And they always appreciate that. I honestly don't think it's that common for their customers to do that, which is kind of sad because I feel like sometimes they're pleasantly surprised when you greet them. And I'm like, and then sometimes if they're like with my Eat a Bag menu, we've gotten pretty close, and sometimes she'll include like a little gift in my Eat a Bag shipment, which is like super sweet.
Oh.
So, how long, I guess in this case, the tote bags again, how long does this process like typically take from when you first reached out to them and then when you received the bags?
Depends on the manufacturer and just the item that you're making. I think if I had gone with just a simple standard tote bag with screen printing on top, the process would have probably taken at most a month for them to get it done and shipped to me. But since I wanted presentations on my bag, like I have my two inside pockets, the zipper top, the little loop, the little zippered pocket, they had to customize my bag like it was a built bag the way that I requested it. So I think the process took a bit over a month, like a month for the production and a week or so for shipment. But I would gauge anywhere from 1 to 2 months for you to be able to receive the sample physically in your hands per manufacturer.
I don't know why I would have thought it would take longer. That seems like pretty reasonable, especially for tote bags, and it's all customized.
Yeah, maybe it's because you're like thinking of your Eat a bag. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's so much more moving parts and like specifics, but technically a tote bag is just sewn cotton and screen printing. So it takes a long time when you're like anxiously waiting for it, but like in retrospect, it's not that long of a period.
I know you brought up going on Alibaba, so how would you go about finding manufacturers like through Alibaba? Or like, do you have specific tips that you knew when you were researching manufacturers?
Well, I always turned on the verified merchant button, and I'll also look at their reviews and how long they've been in business for. I think for me, anything 3 plus years of being in business can be a good sign, and go to their pages that they're listing for their products and read through the reviews because customers will let you know what they think about the products. So, good reviews, a good sign of a reliable manufacturer, and bad reviews should probably stay away.
Yeah, very fair. And I feel like sometimes it could be considered like common sense to look at reviews. But even sometimes I'm a little skeptical because you don't know if the reviews are doctored or sometimes there's just not enough reviews, but then you don't know if people are just, I don't know, reluctant to share that that's the manufacturer they're using, so that's why they're not or there's not a lot of reviews. But in the case of products, do you grade or quality check your products?
Yes, typically for all the larger items like tote bags, bucket hats, enamel pins, even down to charms, I will go through and quality grade every product that I receive.
And what are some like so-called issues that would consider that item as like B grade or second grade?
So it differs depending on the product that you're grading. So things like enamel pins, overfilled enamel, chipping in the enamel, or the metal plates. But for tote bags, it'd be like loose threads, dirt stains, or any kind of like colored spots that were misprinted during the screen printing process. So basically anything you would consider to not be sellable at full market price. So if you look at it and you see a flaw that you think, I don't know if I can sell that at full price, I would consider that a B grade.
It kind of sucks because there isn't a so-called like standard, especially within like the art small business community as to what's considered a B grade because some of us might be more, I wouldn't say picky, but more specific as to what a B grade is. But then to the customer, they don't even like what's the problem with the bag or what's the problem with the hat. And then even sometimes with me, when I buy B grade items, I'm like, I mean, I'm glad there was a discount, but I don't understand what the problem is. But I feel like, we all
I
have different B grade standards.
I definitely had to retrain myself to start grading my products from the consumer's eye because I feel like as the artist and the business owner, we want our products to be perfect. So we will nitpick down to like the tiniest details when we're looking at our products and it's like the tiniest thing, you're a B grade. But most of the times, a lot of customers will, like you said, will look at B grades and be like, what's wrong with this? I can't even tell. And so sometimes I'll even just like give the product that I'm unsure about to like a friend and be like, hey, look at this. And if they take a look at it and they're like, cool, looks great, there you go, the consumer's viewpoint. So I think like we all just kind of had to train ourselves to be less nitpicky when grading our products because our definition of like what is A grade can be very different from the customer's viewpoint of an A grade product.
Yeah, and I've noticed, especially with quality checking, sometimes just because I've looked at a specific item for so long, the issues start to become more noticeable. But I've noticed when, because now my friends are usually the ones like grading my products, like the Ita bags and stuff. And sometimes if they're not sure if it's a B grade, they'll like ask me, and I'm like, I don't even know what the problem is, and like, because I haven't seen like the different bags. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's fine. Like, if there's a problem, the customer will email me. So that's like how I try to view it as well. Like, would you say that's like a common occurrence, like to find B grade items like within your stock?
Ideally, you don't want to find B grades. In a perfect world, we would have no B grades, right? But we are not in a perfect world, and a lot of our products are handmade, so there's bound to be imperfections and flaws in the products that you're receiving. But I would say anything more than 30% of your total products being a B grade is would be considered an issue, and I would personally reach out to my manufacturer if I had that percentage or anything higher of B grades in the shipment that I receive.
Yeah, I feel like 30% is the standard that I've also heard. And I feel like depending on the item as well, especially for bigger items, and maybe you can say if it's the same with your hats or your tote bags. But I know for me with my Ita bags, sometimes if even if there's like a small amount that there's an issue with, like let's say the magnet's not working or some of the bag strap like keeps coming off. But even with my Ita bags, my manufacturer, because I did mention like, oh, could you double check with the next coming shipment that to make sure that it doesn't do this? She said, oh, just let me know how many of like those issues were with the other stock, and then they can just include the new stock or like replacement stock with the next product. So I was like, oh, that's great. So it definitely is worth reaching out when, even if it's like a smaller amount, for your bigger items. With if you do have those issues, how do you usually like go about telling them? Or like what's the best way to communicate those issues without seeming too pissed off?
Well, first, I actually have to convince myself to tell them. I think for the longest time running my business, I was really afraid to come to my manufacturer to be like, hey, there's an issue with these products because I don't know, maybe I'm just like, oh no, what if it ruins the relationship that we built? Or what if they think that I'm like super pissed at them when I'm just like, this is a problem. Can we try to fix it? Kind of thing. So I think definitely don't be hesitant to reach out to your manufacturer because most of the time they are willing to compromise and kind of discuss with you the issues so that they can prevent it in the next shipment or even remake whatever it is that the B grades was. Or even sometimes if it's the whole batch is very problematic and basically kind of ruined, they will like compensate you, remake the whole thing, or even give you a refund as long as you talk to them about it and you're reasonable. Don't approach them and be like, why did you mess up my products, blah, blah, blah. Like, don't be mean about it, but just be nice but stand your ground. You know, like, hey, I noticed there was an X amount of B grades in this shipment, and I think that's a bit too high. Is there any way we can remake this? Is there any way I can get a compensation? Is there something you can do to prevent this in my next round of orders? And stand your ground on what you want when you're coming to them with this request.
Yeah, and I've also noticed that it helps to not be overly picky. I remember seeing on the Artist Alley Discord, I remember some people would, I wouldn't say complain, but they were finding issues with like a specific type of pin, and there's like a lot of detail in this pin design. And I think their manufacturer forgot to fill in like a specific color on one part of the pin, but it was so tiny that I feel like a normal person wouldn't see that. And I understand the artist noticed it because obviously it's the artist. They were the ones who are picking and choosing the colors. But I remember their manufacturer, when they did reach out to discuss that issue, the manufacturer was, I would say, like refused to remake the pin or even offer a refund because it was such a tiny issue that like no one would notice it. And I mean, I'm not trying to diminish that particular artist situation, but it also helps to just be a little bit more compassionate with your manufacturer rep because sometimes, again, it's not that big of a deal sometimes. I think we're just too harsh on ourselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that all these products are handmade by humans. So once again, we can't expect perfection. As much as we want to, we can't because there's just always going to be some flaws with your products, as it is with any product that you're going to make or receive or buy. So definitely don't be as nitpicky if you can help it, if it's just like a really small detail.
So you also vend in Artist Alley, and when did you start vending in person?
Started vending in person. I think it was March 2022. It was the Anna Marketplace in Little Tokyo. I think
Yes.
that was the first event I actually met you in person.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I think yeah, it's gonna be like what, 2 year anniversary. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, approaching.
Yeah. So since then, how many events have you done so far?
At least 25, but I'm pretty sure it's closer to 30 by now.
Oh dang. Congrats.
Yeah. So much. It's like crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. So out of all of the conventions slash events, which one would you say was your most successful?
I think ALA of this year, surprisingly, that con blew me away. I already
Yeah.
was so surprised with its results last year. It was the con that made me quit my job to begin with, but I think this year's like numbers just kind of exceeded my expectation and really like raised my expectations as to how much I could potentially be earning from conventions.
Yeah, I know a lot of people give ALA shit, but it's been really good to us so far. Knock on wood, but like it's
Yeah,
been pretty
I
good.
honestly no complaints.
And since you've been doing cons like the past couple years, and considering how competitive artist alleys have become, and I know we've talked about applying to multiple cons because we don't know if we'll get into like some of them or even one of them. In the case of getting into more than one that's happening on the same weekend, how do you go about deciding which of the two or three or whatever conventions to attend?
I think it comes down to several factors that I'll consider. One is its distance or location from me because flying means flights and hotels, Uber costs, so that's going to be a lot more expensive in terms of expenses prior to even attending the con. And the second thing would be how big the con is, or how, like, the chances of success at that con. So if I got accepted into a con that's only like a 1 day, 5,000 attendees versus a really big 3, 4 day con boasting like 30,000 plus attendees, even if the expenses of that bigger con may be higher, I would still choose that one over the smaller con because the chances of me making more profit is higher at that second convention. And then I think also the third factor is just how much I want to go to that con. Like I know I got into SakuraCon and KawaiiCon this year, and although I do love Seattle and I'm really glad that the SakuraCon Lotto gods were on my side this year, I also really want to go to Hawaii. And that was like my sole deciding factor. Like, I want to go to Hawaii, so we're gonna do Kauai Con. So there's a lot of like factors into play, and it differs every single time you get accepted into both, and depending on the events. But those are just some factors that I personally will consider when trying to decide between two events that I got accepted into that are happening at the same time.
Yeah, I haven't been in that situation. I think the closest was, I think last year I applied for 626 Night Market Arcadia because I wasn't sure if I would get into Anime Expo. And then because I did ended up going into Anime Expo, I did have a proxy for that event. But I think at that time, now knowing what I knew from last year, I probably would just stick to Anime Expo because that was kind of a headache having to do two conventions at the same time or two events at the same time. I feel like that's definitely a valid way of thinking through of which event to go with, just because the level of where you are in Artist Alley, can you even afford to fly to a convention? Because there's just a lot of factors. And I think we're also lucky because we're both in SoCal. Usually we can just drive to an event versus like in the case of June, she has to fly everywhere. Since there are cons where you'd have to drive or fly, how do you decide when to drive versus when to fly to an event or a con?
I think first factor is distance. If I can get there 5 hours or less, I would most definitely drive. Like I know I drive to most of the Vegas ones just because it just seems doable. But I think anything more where I'm like, oh, I might have to like take a really long rest stop or like get a hotel for the night. Like I would not drive across the country,
I don't know how people do
kind of
that.
thing. I think it right. Or like those like 15 plus
Oh
hour
God.
drives just to get somewhere. I think I know myself, and at some point the money that you're going to spend on the ticket is worth the time and your own sanity. And I just think that sometimes it's just worth it to invest in that flight instead of having to do that 15 plus 20-hour drive to get somewhere.
Yeah, I remember talking to some artists, and sometimes they would say, like, I think in Fanime, I think my neighbors were from Texas, and they literally drove from Texas to NorCal. And I think it was like 12 plus hour drive. I don't know how people do that. Like, I think I just don't like, as someone from LA, which is kind of funny, I don't like driving a lot. And even an hour is kind of long for me. I don't know how people do that.
Yeah, I was just like, for Fanime, I would consider driving to NorCal. It's 8 hours, so more than five. But I think the potential of being able to jam pack my car with inventory. So also something to consider is like how big is that con and how much stuff do you want to be able to physically bring with you, right? Because with flying, there's the additional expense of either an additional checked bag or sending your merch to the hotel you're staying at, which can be a way for you to get more merch there, but of course it's extra money. There seems to be a con that is worth driving to be able to get the most merch that you can there. Could be worth it.
And even having the freedom to drive wherever you need to go, because if you remember when we did Anime Las Vegas last year, like me and Jody flew, but then we would have to Uber. And like luckily you and Tyler had a car, so then that helped the commute for Vegas.
I think it really sucks to like be in a city and not have a car, especially coming from California. We are so car dependent that a lot of the times in these other cities, if public transportation is not a reliable form of transportation, the additional expenses of having to Uber everywhere and then not being able to just get food whenever you want to and need to can also be like really annoying as well.
Yeah, because Uber Eats can really rack up the cost. So, having done all of these conventions the past few years, how would you define a successful convention for you?
Well, the most obvious thing is money because we are in here to be able to pay for our bills and our life. So you want to break even, but I would consider it successful if I manage to profit from it, especially because you're putting in so much time, energy, and effort to even get to the con set up and then there for how many hours throughout the entire weekend. You want some kind of profit back from that. But I also think the definition of success is really dependent on where you're at in your con journey. So when I was just starting off and really new to the scene, making back my table plus small amount of profit and being able to meet and network with people, I'd consider that successful. But now that I am full time into this small business and my expectations for how much I should be earning at conventions is higher, that sum in profit looks very different from how it looked like when I first started. Your definition of good profit can be very different compared to another artist's. And putting the money aside, important, but if we just put that aside, I think a successful con can also be considered one that you really like the attendees at, you got to meet a lot of artist friends and you were able to network, because I think all those factors are really important to just the vibes and the community of an artist alley at a convention.
Plus one to depending on where you are in your artist alley journey, because I know in the beginning, when I first did ALA, which was like my first convention or first event, I think the amount I made, which was I did break even and then I did make a little bit more, I don't think that would fly with how much I would expect this time. And I know you shouldn't have expectations when going to a convention, but again, as you mentioned, now that we do this full time, we do have to make a certain amount to actually not only just break even, but even pay bills or stock up for inventory for another convention. And I feel like the stakes are just much higher when this is your full time. And having known all of that, is there anything that you would do if you could start like Artist Alley over again?
So I think something I would do if I could start Artist Alley over again is do a lot more networking in person. I think I was really like stuck on having to stay at my table because I wanted to interact with the customers and be the one managing sales. And even sometimes I didn't have a helper with me, so staying at my table was not a choice but a necessity. But I think I, for the first few events, really like missed out on the opportunity to walk around and get to know all of these like amazing artists that are in the community. And I think at first I was hesitant because it seemed like this like exclusive scene almost, and I wasn't really sure how nice and welcoming everyone is. Everyone is very nice and welcoming. I wish I had known that in hindsight, and I think if I had been able to make all these like artist friends and became closer with these artists that I'm seeing at conventions, it just would have been like more, oh my God, I know you kind of vibes earlier on in my artist alley experience.
I also agree with that. I think I'm usually very shy in the beginning, and sometimes I get into my own head of thinking of what I would say or being afraid because I don't know what people will think when I introduce myself. It's super important to introduce yourself to other artists, even with just starting with your neighbors and just being friendly helps you warm up to networking with everyone else. And I feel like it also just makes your con experience a lot easier and a lot more fun that way because these are some people that you're going to see at different conventions anyway. And as you establish that rapport over time, that's also how I feel like I made friends. Like that's how we became friends too, because we would see each other at different conventions besides seeing each other on socials. And it just makes your whole life so much easier and a lot more enjoyable that way versus not knowing anybody in Artist Alley.
Yeah, I think having all of these friends in Artist Alley has like saved my ass on so many occasions. Either
Yeah.
needing someone to watch my table, or like, does anyone have food? Or, oh, I forgot panels and connectors. Does anyone have any extras? Like, they can literally save your butt. Just having friends is so useful. Like, of course, be friends with them, but most of the time, like, these artists in Artist Alley have your back. even if you don't know them, you can like go to your table neighbor and be like, hey, like, do you have an extra grid cube connector that I can borrow for the weekend? And even if they don't know who you are, most of the time they'll be like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, 100%. I feel like I don't even know the number of times I've asked you for scissors or even like binder clips. It's so
At
helpful, yeah.
Ivy, Tylenol.
Yeah, it's like, do you have allergy medicine? And you have your little all
Yes,
your pills.
Tylenol, Advil. I got it all.
So what advice would you give to someone who wants to start Artist Alley but feels intimidated?
My advice would simply be just start. Like, do your research to have an idea of what you're getting yourself into. But I think a lot of people are just too hung up on waiting for the right time. Like, I don't have enough followers, I don't have a large social media presence, I don't have enough products. Those are not reasons for you to not start. I don't think I had a massive following when I started selling an Artist Alley either, and I probably had 20 designs of print stickers and maybe 10 acrylic charms when I first did my very first Artist Alley event. I say to just go for it, because with the money that you're going to be making from your Artist Alley events, you can reinvest into more products. And Artist Alley is a great way to be able to get yourself out there for other people to find you that wouldn't have necessarily found you just scrolling on social media. So those things can grow with time, but you shouldn't let that thought of, oh, I don't have XYZ, or I'm waiting for the right time. All you're going to do is continue to wait for the right time. So you might as well just start if you have the funds to be able to put into getting a table.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people start to speculate, like, oh, I don't want to start doing this until I figure this out, or even like figuring out my display or have this number of products. But I feel like all of that you can't really figure out until you actually do Artist Alley. Because even with my display, I didn't really know how to go about it. Like, oh, I'll just do height and everything. But as I did more events, that's when I figured out, oh, this is what works best for my display, or oh, seeing all these other Artist Alley displays, this is kind of how I want to go in this direction. And it's one of those things that you can't really think about until you actually do it. And again, somewhat similar to that, for people who are new to Artist Alley, like what advice would you recommend that they ignore?
Any advice regarding needing to make your table and display like grand and perfect at once? Like, I agree, having a good display is very important and can be very helpful in getting attendees to your table and increasing your sales. But if you're just starting off, stick with the basics. When you're starting off, you don't know if the Artist Alley scene is even something that you enjoy and want to keep pursuing. So after your first event, if you're like, nah, this isn't for me, now you've just invested so much money into your display that's no longer going to be put to use. Be smart about what you buy for your display. And as you keep doing Artist Alley, and if you decide that this is something you want to keep pursuing, it's something that you really enjoy, then start investing in the things that is going to make your display curated to your brand and the shopping experience that you want the customers to have. I think I used a plastic tablecloth from Dollar Tree for my very first event, and I didn't even get like a table runner with my brand on it for my table until after I did like 8 or 9 events. So it took me a while to get to the place where I'm like, okay, maybe I should focus on really curating my display and making it like look the way I want it to look. So don't invest all your money into making the perfect display at once, because you don't even know what your ideal perfect display is until after you start vending and there are things that you know that you prefer. Oh, self-serve or display only type of table. What are the things you like to have? So you figure all these out with time. You learn through practical application, right? So you're not going to be able to curate your perfect display until you have the experience for you to know what you would consider your ideal display.
I feel like for those who are new to Artist Alley, especially now, it's very intimidating because I feel like we're at a point where Artist Alley isn't as amateur as it used to be. Even sometimes I get intimidated by other people's displays because it's so very like on brand and like super professional. I can't imagine like how someone who's new to Artist Alley might be thinking, seeing like these really nice, really big displays. And again, same thing, what you said, what I said. It's like you really just have to put it into practice and go to these conventions and actually vend to really figure out like what your display will look like. And we're all still growing. I mean, my display now is different than how it was probably a few months ago, and I'm still going to change up my display. And you can never really have the perfect display. Like, you can have a nice one, but you will never reach a perfect display because your business changes and you get new products, and that's how you figure out how you want it to look.
It's gonna be a never-ending cycle of how much higher can I build my display to fit
Yeah.
this 6 foot table.
It's like, how much stuff can I fit on this? Like, it truly is. Oh my God.
Realistically, when does this get dangerous as a fire hazard?
I know. It's like, especially when I see Jioon's booth like with her hats, and I'm like, oh my, how does it like? That's a strong grid.
The fortress.
Yeah. So now we are moving into our little speed round, which is not so little because I'm sure it'll be a good speed round. And feel free to elaborate on any of the questions or any of your answers to the questions. So, how do you find your cons or like con apps?
I think the most popular and well known of methods is through the Artist Alley International Network Discord. I think that was it for the acronym. A lot of useful information there. I know that I also use the animecons.com a lot when I was first starting off. And after you meet and network with a whole bunch of artists in Artist Alley, you now get this beautiful thing called word of mouth. And so a lot of the times your artist friends will also let you know what cons are coming up, when applications are coming out, and that is like a gold resource for being able to find conventions to vend at. And something I also did when I was first starting off was I hope it doesn't sound stalkerish, I would go to pages of artists that I know that vended at events, and I will scroll through their page and see them posting about different events that they were vending at. And that's how I kind of got my intel on which events I could look into applying to.
No, 100% with, especially, I wouldn't consider it stalking, but I love, like,
I'm
especially when
just
people,
checking out social media.
yeah, it's like, I'm just really good at social media. It's like, I'm stalking. Um, especially when people post their catalog, or like, not their catalog, but like their upcoming events, I love to screenshot those. And especially if I see a lot of big artists or even a lot of friends who do this full time, seeing that they're doing the same events, it kind of gets me thinking like, oh, maybe I should do that event next year. And I end up doing that event next year. So it's like it's definitely a good way to gauge if it's a good event to go at, because I don't think people who do it full time or who are big artists would waste their time going to a specific con if it's not usually like established or good. Do you prefer first come first serve, lottery, or juried applications, and why?
Hard. They all are the spawn of the devil to some degree, but I think if I had to choose, it'd be between juried or lotto, because one, I'm in control, and one, I have absolutely no control, right? Because with juried, I can do my best in ensuring that I am proud of my portfolio and what's on my portfolio, and it showcases what I want to be showcased as my art and my brand to the jury panel. So I know that I've done everything that I can to give myself the best chance of getting in, and now it's up to the jury panel. For lotto, it's up to the lotto gods. I am completely out of control. So I think it's like that end of the spectrum, right? Where it's like I did what I can, now I'm just waiting for results, versus there's nothing I can do. It is just luck. First come first serve just gives me too much anxiety because my internet is slow. I can't type fast. I'm just very slow. So whatever first come first serve con that I've applied to, it just I cannot get it in time. Like Otakon this morning, when we woke up at 6 a.m. to try to get their apps in, I was like, I'm gonna die a premature death from either a panic attack or my heart beating too fast and me going into cardiac arrest or something. It's too stressful and it's too much. I'd rather fill out the application and then wait and let it be.
That's fair. I do like that you brought up that jury does have some sort of control, because I think before I would consider that you don't have much control in jury just because there is a juried panel, and even though they're not supposed to be biased. Of course, there is some type of subconscious bias in some ends. I think reframing it as having some control, because you do have control when it comes to putting together your portfolio and representing yourself in the best possible light, kind of makes me feel better when I work with juried apps.
I think that was definitely like my viewpoint at first for jury as well. So I kind of had to reshift my mindset after getting kind of just like sad after not getting accepted into several jury cons. But I think it's just reframing your thinking into I did the best that I can to best represent my art and my brand. And every jury panel is going to have different people with different opinions. So in the end, it's not a reflection of your art or your worth as an artist, but just differing opinions. So maybe this year is not your time. Maybe next year. Next year is the time to come, you know?
What's a dream convention you'd like to vend at?
Well, it was AX and I'm going this year, so like literal dream come true and I'm so
Yay.
excited, but I've known about AX as a convention since I was in high school, so many years ago, and it always seemed like this far out of reach exclusive convention that people would vend at, and so it was always like this painted image of oh, like DreamCon right there. So when I got into it this year, I screamed, like audibly screamed, handshaking with the email because it was my dream convention and we're going.
I am so excited. I cannot wait. Like, I'm counting down the days until July. Like I told June, this is ALA on steroids. I'm gonna be so excited.
Really, ALA was the reunion con for all of like our mutual artist friends, but I feel like AX is now going to be our second reunion, which is crazy because I think most of us just always had this thought in our mind of like AX is a faraway dream. We're not going to get into it, but to see the amount of new artists that we know that have gone into it this year and that we're going to be able to see at the event. And I'm like so excited to be able to walk around and hang out with everyone, like shakes in excitement.
I am so excited. I cannot wait. So what's a little known secret about vending an artist alley?
So I think a little known vending secret in Artist Alley is to always have deals for your products. It entices the customers to buy more as you're at your table. Like the way we are kind of lured in by deals and sales when we go shopping, it's the same concept for Artist Alley. So things like one sticker for $5 or three for 12 really helps just bump your sales number up a bit more and get the customers to buy more at your table. And a lot of the times they will also rope their friends into the purchase with them as well. Like, oh, I want these two. You want the third one? Then we can get a discount kind of deal. So really take advantage of that consumer mindset and make sure you always are running deals at your table for Artist Alley.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for deals. Like whenever when I see an artist, like let's say I think if I want to buy like two jet tags and they have a 3 for 30 deal, I'm gonna buy a third one. It's like, where am I gonna put the third one? I don't know, but I want a third one now.
And, and it's just that consumer mindset, right? Because technically, if I did just buy one, I'd be spending less money than if I
Yeah,
bought
it's
three.
like I save
But
more.
if I buy three, I'm not spending more money. I save some money. So really take advantage of the consumer mindset because you know what it feels like to be a consumer and have that mindset. So play that game at your artist alley table.
It's like you're gonna use a third one eventually. Might as well get it because you save money.
I'll find a use.
So when it comes to Artist Alley, what do you invest in and what are you cheap about?
So I think I'm at a point in Artist Alley where I really invest into my display because I've done this long enough and this is something I want to keep on doing. So I think it's really important for me personally to curate a display that really represents my brand. And when people see it, I want them to see my table and be like, oh yeah, that's Drawn by Ivy's table, kind of thing. So just making sure my color scheme is the way I want it to look. So anything that I think can make the shopping experience better for my customers or make my display look really enticing, I will invest in. And I think where I save money, it's probably like food during the weekend. I feel like when I'm vending and in the zone at the event, I don't tend to want to eat much. So I'm not too worried about having to spend a lot for food during the con. And like occasionally we eat out with friends and stuff. I don't mind spending on going out to eat, but other than that, I'm not very like lavishly spending on food during con weekends. I would rather kind of save that money to put elsewhere.
Yeah, I've noticed, especially when a con is busy, I don't eat a lot, which is probably a bad thing, but because it's like you're so busy that you don't even consider that you're hungry until after the event, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm starving. But on the opposite side, if a con isn't busy, I snack a lot. It's like really bad.
It's the boredom snacking.
Yeah. And that's why, especially for certain events, sometimes I'll stock up on food because I also don't know if like my helper is gonna want to eat a lot. And then we don't even end up touching the food, and I'm like, I'll just save it for the next con.
My 1085 breads untouched.
Yeah. It's like, I guess we'll save that for breakfast. Still on the topic of Artist Alley, if you have one, what is your controversial Artist Alley opinion?
So I think my controversial artisani opinion, which might upset some people, but if you are vending at these events and it seems like event after event that other people are doing well at and you're not necessarily doing well at, I think at one point you need to kind of stop and think to yourself, like, is the con the problem, or do I need to change something about my product or my display? I'm not saying that there are not outlying factors that will affect your personal experience with vending at a convention. Of course, there are just going to be those conventions where maybe the audience is not your target demographic, or you just got like a bad table spot. That happens. But if it just seems to be happening quite frequently and you're just not doing well event after event, sometimes you just gotta look to yourself and ask, hey, what can I do to kind of maybe up my chances of doing better at these types of events, instead of immediately going into blaming the convention for your own performance.
I definitely think that rings very true, especially if you're one of the very few who isn't doing well at an event, but everyone else seems to be doing super well. That's definitely an opportunity for you to kind of look into your own self and figure out what can I change. And again, I think we did bring this up with June a little bit. Sometimes it's also maybe just that the cons audience is not necessarily aligning with your ideal audience. I know Cloris, like of Cloris Creates, she mentioned that she does a lot better at night markets versus anime cons, and that's why she's doing less anime cons, if not no anime cons this year. Because like she has a bunch of like cute animal like keychains and stickers. And I feel like that appeals a lot better with the night market audience, which is a little bit more general, versus anime cons. People are there to see like anime themed items and not necessarily like cute animals. But for us, we kill it at anime cons, but maybe with night markets, not so great, you know? So it's like also, I guess, like looking into all of those factors and even looking into yourself and just seeing what changes can be made. And a lot of that you can learn from experience in doing a lot more artist alleys and a lot more events. That's when you kind of get a better idea of like how to judge that in a way.
You bring up a really good point in like knowing and researching your target demographic, but I think it's also just a very good habit to get into for post conventions, to really analyze your performance, not just after bad conventions, but even after good conventions. Like ask yourself, what made that a good convention? What like techniques did I use that made it a good convention for me? What is it, the target demographic there that was good for me? Maybe my products were really appealing. Maybe the different way that I set up my table at this event led to my success. And then for bad events, same concept. Why did I do bad at this event? Was it the audience there? Was it my table? Was it things that I'm selling? Was it XYZ factors? So I think even good and bad events alike, it's a really good habit to get into, to always self reflect and look at you yourself as a business and your own art to see what worked well for you and what didn't, so you can use that knowledge and apply it to the next like events or conventions that you'll be attending.
So, team fanny pack or money box?
Fanny pack, 100% fanny pack. I will feel too paranoid having a cash box out. I like the fact that the fanny pack is strapped to me literally, And if it's like across my chest, if you're reaching for it, that seems sus, right? So it's just nice to have it on me.
It's like business and as a
Like you should
woman.
not be coming in. Yeah, right. And I think also just if you're in the convention scene and you see artists wearing fanny packs, like you know what's in there, but it's close to us. But even just like walking around, if you're carrying a cash box, other people looking at you will know what's in that cash box. Well, if they see a fanny pack, that could just be your personal belongings. Like no one is really guaranteed to know what's inside a bag hanging on your body kind of thing. And I also think it's a really good idea to not keep all your money in one spot. Like at the end of the day or even halfway through the day, separate your big bills and stash it somewhere else. So if God forbid anything happens, you don't lose like your entire weekend's worth of profit in one go.
As a paranoid person, I cannot have like a cash box. I'm too terrified. Like I know some people, they'll I guess secure it to their display. I still don't trust it. I feel like even if your cash box is open, they can easily steal it. So I feel like a fanny pack is also like a good affordable way to secure your money rather than a cash box. I feel like for some people, a cash box works for them, just not me personally.
I think it's also because I do a lot of events solo. And so just the ease of mind knowing that I am carrying the cash with me whenever I'm running to the bathroom or going wherever it is that I need to go, that I have it on me. So it significantly reduces the risk of it being stolen versus it being like at my table unattended when I'm gone because I'm doing the con solo. Not comfortable with that. So team fanny pack.
Yeah, and also for safety reasons, which is probably a little bit relevant to this, I always take off my vendor badge as soon as I leave the convention, just because most people, if they know you're a vendor, you might have cash on you, and it is so easy for someone to rob you if they know that you're a vendor. And most likely than not, you have the cash on you. So I think just as a safety precaution, it helps to take your vendor badge off. So are you team suitcase or wagon?
Depends on the convention and the distance from me. If I'm flying, I have no choice but to be team suitcase because I don't think Southwest is going to let me haul a wagon onto their plane. But if I'm doing local events or anywhere that I'm driving to, I am a team wagon person. It's nice and collapsible. I can stack a bunch of those big crates. I think that's
Yeah.
what they're called on top of each other to wheel it in. It's just, I think, easier for me. But when traveling, suitcase.
And for suitcases, are you team hard shell or soft shell?
100% hard shell. I'm too paranoid about water damage. It doesn't rain much in California. I say as it rains so much
Yeah.
this year, but it usually doesn't rain much in California. But I am aware that in other parts of the country, it does rain quite often, and I've seen enough videos of like luggages getting soaked in the rain when they're unloading or loading the plane that I have to go with hard shell. And also, I just think it keeps the display more protected. Like I have panels, grids, things that could potentially break if tossed a bit too hard. So I think the hard shell of the suitcase keeps me more at ease knowing that my stuff feels more protected during the transit.
Yeah, and you have a lot, like with your hats and your tote bags, it's so easy for them to get ruined with weather
The water
and
damage.
water that you have to have hard shell. So what are your go-to con snacks slash food?
I think my non-negotiable is some sort of drinky drink. So either like a coffee, a tea, a boba, just something that I can keep like sipping on throughout the day just to keep me alert and going. And it serves as my motivation to get through the whole day. And then like snacks, I don't tend to snack that much unless it's snow. But if I do have snacks, it's like bread, chips with chopsticks, or like candy, which is honestly all kind of a really bad combination. But during conventions, I let myself eat whatever like I want. The healthy veggie meals can be saved for the rest of the week or after the convention. I think during the convention, I just like need the caffeine, need the sugar rush to really get myself going for the whole day.
And I feel it's difficult to actually eat not solid foods, but like actual food during a con. Like even if you do want to bring veggies, It's so difficult because it gets stuck in your teeth. If it's something that you have to like consume, like you can't consume it very quickly, like carrots, let's say, like people will be walking to your table and then luckily we have a mask to cover our mouth while we're chewing. But it's like it's more effort versus chips and chopsticks. Like, oh, snack. Nope. When no one's in front of your booth, snack again.
Mhm. Yeah, that's why for like if I do bring actual sustenance to a con, I prefer things that are like in bowls and easily eaten in spoonfuls or just like small bites, like banh mi or little bows and stuff, so that you can like eat it in one go and put it away because you know that the moment you take a bite of food, a customer is gonna start talking to you. It's a known thing that happens. And so you can't be spending a whole minute like chewing on your food. Like it's gotta go fast.
Yeah. It's like very small bites is super helpful. It's like as much as I'd love to eat noodles at a con, it's not gonna work.
I actually did that during Level Up Expo last year.
Oh
I had like an
no.
entire beef noodle soup.
A soup? Girl, you cannot eat soup during cons.
It was very messy to eat, but thankfully I did have a helper for that convention, so I could sit off to the side and eat it. But if I was solo, soup would not be an option.
I know, I'd be afraid of like spilling soup.
All over the tote bag.
Oh no. So in terms of, I guess this would be considered personality, would you identify as an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert?
I feel like I fluctuate a lot. I am probably an ambivert. I project very, very extroverted during conventions and when I'm like speaking to people because I think to honestly be in this field and be really successful selling in person, you have to have at least some degree of extrovertedness because talking and engaging with your customers helps you make sales. I define like extrovert and introvert as in like introvert you lose energy through socialization and extrovert you gain energy through socialization. I lose energy. So I think innerly I am an introvert and after cons I take like days to recover and recharge my social battery. It's like literally no one perceive me for the next few days while I recharge and then I'll be ready for the next weekend of projecting extrovertedness again.
It's good that you pointed out that you kind of have to project some kind of like extrovertedness when you're selling at cons. And I think we're lucky in that even if you are like very much on the introversion scale, anime cons, like the stereotypical like anime cons, there's a lot of introverts. So sometimes I feel like even being a little too extroverted might scare them off sometimes. But regardless where you are on the scale, you kind of have to appear at least a little bit extroverted, especially when it comes to like a sales.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point in like being too extroverted can sometimes scare off the customers. I studied like psychology and behavioral like behavior back in college, so it's always been like a really interesting thing for me to think about and apply it to cons, but just like knowing how to read body language and see whether or not that customer is looking for social interaction can really help you during your artist alley experience as well. Like if that customer is just browsing, not making eye contact, didn't say hi first, those are some kind of signs to look out for. Like maybe I shouldn't be like, hi, welcome, how are you? How's the con? Like that might send them running the other way, you know. But if they are coming and like wanting to converse with you and you're just like that might then also have them walk in the other way because they are seeking some sort of connection with your table. So definitely being able to read customers and gauge whether or not they're looking for some kind of interaction with you can really help.
I think after doing cons for like 2+ years, I've kind of gotten a better idea of analyzing like, oh, does this person want to be talkative or are they just browsing? And I feel like that's why I kind of stick to my neutral, like, hello, kind of helps because it's like it kind of helps me gauge like, do they want to talk? Like, then that gives them an invitation, like, you can talk to me. Or maybe they'll just like nod or they'll look at me and I'm fine with that. And it's like, okay, I can save my voice for someone else later on. So, in terms of your products, what is your most popular product? And it could be either from like recently or just most popular of all time.
recently, I think the one piece spinner pin that I have has been receiving a lot of love. I sold out of that one way quicker than I anticipated, and I'm very happy because I'm really, really proud of that product. But I think of all time, it has to be my Appa Chip Chip and the Zuko fire noodles, the stickers and the prints.
Yeah.
I had that one like very early on 2020 in my art career, and I like revamped the design back in 22. But ever since 2020, when that initial design came out, it's always been like one of my best sellers. And even with the revamped design till now, it still sells super well for me at like all the events that I've been at. So I think it really withstood the test of time.
How was it for you with the live action coming up? Like, did that affect sales?
I haven't had any in-person events ever since the live action has come back, but I'm anticipating that once I do more events post the live action being released, I think that it will probably increase the sales. And it's just something that you learn to work with as a small business over time, like learning and anticipating trends based on the media that's being released. And in a way, almost like curating your product releases or anticipating sales numbers to fluctuate depending on those trends in media.
I asked that because I did notice a little bit of a surge on my One Piece items, even though they are usually like my most popular. I feel like there was a little bit more of a surge because of the live action coming out like last year. That's also why I had my Gear 5 Luffy pin because especially with now that he's in the anime, I had to do that. And then same thing with Nanami with like the Shibuya arc. So what's your least popular product?
I think as of now, it's my two Genshin plants sticker sheets, which is
Oh.
unfortunate because I'm actually really proud of the illustrations for that one. But I think once again, it goes back to knowing the audience and the following that you have. I do a lot of anime fan art, so naturally, a lot of my following online is people who like anime and are looking for fan art of anime. So my anime fan art sells really well, but I don't think I have a lot of people who play or watch or like Genshin. So I think those sticker sheets don't do as well for me online simply because my online following is not catered towards that. But they do I find at conventions because conventions is where you find a mixed humble jumble of everyone whose interests are everywhere.
Yeah, and I feel like as time goes on, if you do decide to go more into Genshin, I feel like people will just eventually get used to your Genshin items and then eventually you'll build that following. So what has been your best investment in your business?
I think it was a fairly recent purchase made last year, but it was the Square terminal to take card payments on. I was sitting on that one for a long time because it's like $300. So in my mind, I'm like, I have the Square reader. Why would I need to spend that much amount of money on this terminal? But I think it's been a huge game changer. Just the transaction process has been more hands off. Like you don't have to pass the phone and the reader back and forth between you and the customer. And especially when you're either doing solo or it gets really busy with back-to-back transactions, it's nice to have the customer finish checking out in the front while you're using that time in the back to pack the order and get it ready. And by the time they're done with the transaction and then their stuff and on to the next person, rinse, repeat. And I think also the ability to collect tips without having to verbally ask for the tip has been really useful. I think the amount that I've received in tips till now has basically paid for the machine. From now on, it's just tips. So, very good investment. Expensive? Yes, but I do really enjoy it.
Yeah, I was on the same boat in terms of sitting on it because I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend $300 for a Square terminal. Yeah, I didn't get it until like 9 months into doing conventions, and I don't regret it at all. I love my Square terminal. I've also noticed that I don't know how to do it, but I've seen some people put like it's like, I guess for the screen while it's like black or whatever, you can put your logo or some kind of art design. Yeah, I have to look on
Wow,
Discord because
we
someone
gotta look
described how.
into that.
Yeah, I'm like, that is a game changer. So
That
if
is
I find it, I'll like
true.
send it to you. So what has been your biggest money mistake with your business and why?
I think it was investing in too many products too fast early on in the game, or like buying too much product without testing the waters on how well I think that they'll sell. Because I think when I first made the decision to move into goods that weren't stickers and art prints. So at that time, I was doing acrylic charms and some like washi tapes. I think I was like too ahead of myself and too excited to make all of these things that I ended up ordering like a whole lot without testing out the design first to see if it would do well. Same thing with the washi tapes, and then it ended up being stuck in my inventory for so
Oh
long,
no.
and I was desperately trying to get rid of everything. And so now I think if I'm testing out designs that I'm unsure of whether or not will do well, I'll always order it first in a limited quantity, and then it's like, oh, sold out really quickly. The next batch I can invest in a larger amount of products at the same time. I think I'd rather it be a bit more expensive for the small quantity at the first order than me having just like so much that I'm like, how do I get rid of this kind of thing.
No, yeah, because I was guilty of that in the beginning as well. I think my first enamel pin set, which I don't know if anyone remembers because this was like 2021. My first pin set, I paid out of pocket. It was like the two boba enamel pins and then my first Lucky Cat pin. They do okay now. But I still have them like since 2021 and they were like 100 pieces each. Obviously, I should have just tested the waters first. I feel like a good way is definitely like, yeah, ordering smaller quantities, even though they're more per unit price, or even pre-orders, especially for like bigger items, is a good way to figure out if something will sell well because people will pre-order if they actually really want it. What is your biggest business insecurity?
I think it would probably be not having enough like online sales. I feel like a lot of my revenue right now is really reliant on convention income, and I'll always like see other businesses like having a lot of online sales, which you shouldn't be comparing yourself to other businesses to begin with, but inevitable. So a lot of my income is from conventions instead of my online store, so I really want to work on driving more traffic into my online shop to generate more income online. And I think it's either that or like not having more original art. I do a lot of fan art, and then sometimes it feel like a fake artist for having fan art, or like fan art isn't real art, which is dumb because art is literally in the name kind of thing. But I do want to be able to introduce more original characters, original art into my brand and not be completely reliant on having only fan art.
Going off of the online sales is not as much as like convention money. I feel like I've noticed that as well with me, which is why sometimes I'm afraid to take con hiatuses. Like even right now, I don't have a confirmed con till July, so I am sometimes a little bit worried about that. But I think that most of our money does stem from cons also because people can anticipate that we'll be at a convention and they might just save their money until they see us in person rather than selling online, which is also what I noticed last year when I had like shop updates like early in the year and I didn't have cons. My sales like shot up just because they knew I didn't have cons till like May or so.
That is a very good point you make. Like thinking back at it now, I've received a lot of like DMs or even just people verbally telling me at conventions like, "Oh, I've been waiting to buy that tote bag from you for forever, and I knew you were gonna come to this con, so I was waiting to meet you and buy from you here," kind of thing. So I never really considered that could be a factor why online sales aren't always as poppin' for us because people are just waiting to buy from us in person. But definitely, I think it worries me a bit to be very reliant on convention money, and it makes me almost in a way like feel pressured to have a shop update every single month because that's the only way I'll get new sales unless a video on social media pops up, but it's also sometimes not feasible to push out that many products to have a shop update every single month as well. So
So when did you first feel successful with your business and what does that word mean to you?
for most of us, when we're running a small business, our primary goal is to be able to make enough to afford rent, utility, bills, basically your monthly expenses, right? So I think once I finally hit the point where I realized that the money that I was making from my small businesses is enough for me to pay for my monthly needs, that's when it became viable and I counted it as, hey, this is starting to look pretty successful. But once again, the definition of success varies wherever you're at in your small business journey. When I first started, and it was more of like a side income, side hustle kind of deal, my definition of success was, oh my god, people are seeing my art online and interacting with it. Oh my god, people are placing some orders, and I have some online sales orders. Like, that to me was crazy already, and I considered that as success. But now that I'm at a point where I need to be able to maintain some sort of lifestyle from my business, my success is getting my bills paid every single month.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Like for me, when I first started, as long as I was able to cover costs and maybe buy more stickers or more inventory, I was really happy with it. But now, again, as we've mentioned before, because we're so reliant on this income, as long as we're able to pay our bills and then save some and maybe invest a little more, I'm poppin'. I'm happy. So are you working on any big projects or new products that you'd like to share with the audience?
I am. I have a Haiku enamel pin collection Kickstarter in the process. I think it honestly should be, fingers crossed, live by the time this video goes out, but it's gonna be my biggest enamel pin collection probably ever. There's like 22 characters in the collection, so fingers crossed it gets funded. But I love Haikyuu as an anime, and I've been waiting for a chance to be able to make some fan art and a collection for Haikyuu, so I'm really excited that it is like in the works and so close to being done.
It's a long time coming, girl. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'll also have that linked
All
below.
right, all right.
So I think those are all of my questions. Oh my goodness. This was a long video too, chock full of
It
information.
just it was
Thank you
honestly
for
felt like
joining.
catching up with a friend. Thank you for having me.
So this was so much fun, and I learned a lot from this conversation. So I feel like even if we do talk about this a lot, like on our own, or even like with June, it's been great having this recorded. So where can our audience find you?
I am at DrawnbyIvy, DrawnbyIvy, across basically all of my social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and I also have a YouTube channel where I do mostly Artist Alley vlogs right now, but I'm hoping to branch into a bunch of other things very soon, so you can also find me on there.
Perfect. And thank you again for joining us, and thank you to everyone who joined us for this episode. I'll see y'all in the next episode. Bye.